I was on city council in the 80s, early 80s, when I was a very young woman, and I loved city government. And when I left it for other endeavors, I decided if I ever could, I'd get back. So last fall, I ran again for a seat that had been vacated. Government service to me is just that. It's not politics, it's public service, and particularly at the local level. I say government that governs closest to the people governs the best. I would say from a political standpoint, it's not so much a lack of awareness of climate change as a denial of the science. You know, we're in a very Republican area, and repeatedly people are hearing climate change is not happening. It's all a figment of the Democrats' imagination. So it's very challenging in this area for politicians to stand up and say, let's look at the data and let's assume that perhaps it might happen. And if that happens, what does it mean for our community? The way that I have found as a local politician that's best to communicate with my constituents is practically one-on-one. Every month we have neighborhood watch meetings. When you campaign, I go door to door, so you meet one-on-one. Obviously, that is the best way to communicate. All communications professionals will tell you that. But it's not mass communications. So the whole idea of social media, education, the educational system, I think we have to get to our students in the schools. But then again, that brings up another political element. Is the school board going to allow the information about climate change to be taught? And I'm not sure where we are in Horry County, but I know denial is very, very deep in this community. I am not sort of a believer about climate change. I am definitely a believer about climate change. I've taken 2 trips in the past decade. One was we crossed the Bering Sea, and another is we traveled down the Magellan Strait. And in both communities, we saw the glaciers that are disappearing, and we talked to local people. And those people are frightened because they have seen over 25 and 30 years glaciers completely disappear. They are not building back. And so that's not an anecdotal situation. That's, you know, real life experience. Plus I read and I look at the information, and I'm very, very concerned that we may be getting to a tipping point where we're not going to be able to fix it. So I'm glad that you all are doing this to raise awareness, and maybe collectively we can find a way to begin to talk to people who don't believe it's happening. The Greater Grand Strand is very vulnerable to what's going to happen with climate change. It's the rising ocean, it's the marine life, it's our tourism, it's the cultural effects, like for example the sweetgrass baskets. They are a part of our culture, and they're going to disappear when the sweetgrass disappears. So our $20 billion tourism industry is at risk, and we need to be able to look at it. I really don't know how we begin to engage the community in a positive way to accept the information that is there, that climate change is real. What I'm experiencing is we've got a very large retired population, and I've actually had people tell me, that's not my problem, I won't be here. So emotionally we have to appeal to their concern for their children and grandchildren. I think that is an important appeal that we make. Well, you know, we can leave it and that won't be our problem, but we do have children and grandchildren. I think we have to continue to put the facts out there. But what I really think we need to do is individually, one-on-one, work with the members of Congress, the congressional delegation, to tell them this is real. And it is such a universal problem, not just a national problem, that a little local politician like me has to look to leadership beyond the boundaries of Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach has 18,000 people. That's it. Horry County is one of the largest counties in the state. We have the largest tourism base in the state, but we're fragmented. So we need to look at statewide leadership and national leadership to embrace the concept of climate change and help begin the education and the policy change. The way that we get to members of Congress, our congressional delegation, has got to be one-on-one from local leaders to say quietly, look, please sit down with us. Please look at the evidence. This is going to happen. Even if you don't believe it might happen, at least work with us to put some laws in place in case it does. I don't think that individual constituents at the Myrtle Beach level will be able to affect congressional change. I think it has to be already elected leaders, business leaders, political leaders in the state quietly going and saying, let's talk about this. The other thing that we need to do to influence Congress is to not make it a Democrat and a Republican issue. It's not Democrat or Republican, it is the environment is collapsing around us, and what are we going to do about it? The main thrust that we have had to mitigate climate change has been beach renourishment. And that's been up and down the coast, and every 10 years or so we renourish the beach because we keep losing it. That would be the only thing that I see us doing in direct response to what's happening with climate change. But let me talk about one other challenge. Not just at the local level, but at every governmental level. We are faced every day with this problem has to be solved today. And there seems to be a lack of vision to get above the weeds and look at the bigger picture. And that's what we have to look. We have to look for leaders who have vision, and leaders who are willing to take a risk, and leaders who are willing to say, I don't care if I lose. This is important enough for us to fight. For example, probably I will be ostracized for coming out publicly saying that, climate change is important. But I've got 3 years till I have to run for re-election, so I'll probably weather that storm. And we have to be careful about it, because if we have a friend in Congress who's willing to work with us, we have to make sure that person gets re-elected. So we come back down to education, science, information, and removing it from the political sphere of Al Gore, who was the huge, and he was right, but he's Al Gore. So we need to look for national spokespeople who are apolitical, who can begin to talk with real conviction. The main thing I wanted to say, and I've said it once, but I'll probably say it again, is that when you're an elected government official, particularly at the local level, the day-to-day demands of just keeping the economy going, keeping the toilets flushing, is very hard to move beyond that to look at really big picture items. But I want to say that's what leadership is all about. People elect leaders to lead, not to follow the will of the people. And so I would just encourage all leaders, business, political, to look at the information and to lead and not follow. I think the messaging on climate change doesn't necessarily have to be changed but tweaked. Number one, we need several good spokespeople, respected leaders in our country, and they need to have a consistent message. We need to use social media a lot more. Sometimes when you're dealing with an issue that relies very heavily on science, people turn it off because they're just it's just too complicated. So it has to be a simple message. The key to me is the right person to deliver the message, and I don't think we found that yet. I think the corporate people have as much at stake as anybody, and I think in the long run they're going to be the ones that are going to control what happens in Myrtle Beach. When the banks realize that the ocean level is rising and the oceanfront properties are going to be underwater in 100 years, pretty soon they're going to start looking. Maybe 50 years from now they're going to quit lending on the beach. Insurance companies are going to quit insuring on the beach. And so rather than waiting for that day to happen, let's try to be proactive and see how we're going to control the environment so we keep our tourist economy strong.